And as you know, there are some reports at the moment in the media that we'd love to get an on-the-record response from you on. This from Reuters a little bit early this morning, that Qatari mediators have held talks with Hamas officials to try to negotiate the release of Israeli women and children held in Gaza. Minister, are there active talks led by Qatar to release hostages?
Well, what I guess you just read to me is that Qataris were talking to Hamas about it. Israel's not been negotiating with anybody.
Has Qatar spoken to you about the release of hostages and their role they might play as a mediator?
As I said, what the Qataris speaking to Hamas and talking about different things. Look, people are outraged by what happened. I'm sure you're outraged. I appreciate the condolences. I know they're heartfelt and they're deeply appreciated. We haven't seen something like this, even in the Middle East, which, as you know, is has a lot of brutality and savagery in it. We haven't seen savagery like this since ISIS. When you have killers, scores of hundreds, really, of terrorists who invaded Israel on Saturday morning in trucks with AK-47s and just mowed down people who were at a dance festival, went into people's homes, killed whole families, kidnapped children, women, elderly. This thing is sick and it's savage, and you really have a battle between the forces of civilization on the one side and the forces of barbarism, and civilization is going to have to win. And that's exactly what we're going to do in the days ahead. And as you heard from Secretary Blinken, it may take some time, but we're going to exact such a high price that not only will Hamas never consider doing this again, I think none of Israel's enemies are going to ever think about doing something like this again. You know, the feeling of euphoria on the other side, Israelis, those of a certain age, remember 1973, when a surprise attack was launched against us on 2 different fronts. There was euphoria then for a few days, but then Israel turned the tide. And the end of the war looked very different than the beginning of the war, and this is exactly what's going to happen now.
Minister, based on what you've just told us, can we just assume then that a full ground invasion is inevitable?
We're going to do whatever we have to do to send a lesson that they're going to understand for many, many decades. Not just Hamas, not just the other terror organizations in Gaza, but all the terror organizations and all the enemies of Israel, and Iran is the biggest enemy of all, and they're pulling the strings behind the scenes, giving money, giving weapons, having meetings to try to coordinate attacks in Israel. And as I speak to you, Iran is trying to push other people into the theater of war. We're going to have to send a message to everybody, because Israel, you know, as you know, we're a tiny country. We're about the size of New Jersey. America's about 40 times the population that we have, which goes to show you how heinous the attack was yesterday. Because when you have maybe 1,000 people in Israel who were killed on a single day, and your population is 40 times the size, it's around 40,000 Americans. That's more than 10 9/11. So you can imagine the sense of disgust that we have. We have to send a message to all of Israel's enemies, because we're a strong country, but we're tiny, and we can go from strength to vulnerability. I think people are going to see the strength of Israel, the might of Israel, and I hope that the wall-to-wall support that we appreciate, that we have today, from President Biden, the support on both sides of the aisle in Washington. I hope in the days ahead that that support continues when Israel has to do what it has to do in order to exact such a heavy price from this terror organization, that not only do they not threaten us, that they don't threaten any civilized country around the world. Believe me, this will inspire terrorists the world over, just like you had the ISIS caliphate that started inspiring people all around the globe. The world came together and understood they have to crush that caliphate. We have a force like that right in our backyard, not thousands of miles away, but right in our backyard, a few meters over the borders, and we're going to have to crush both their capability and also their spirit. They will rue the day 2 days ago. We're going to remember that day. Israel will always remember that day, but all the terror organizations around us are going to remember this period for a very long time, and the critical miscalculation that Hamas made, thinking that it was going to be business as usual in Israel. Believe me, it is not. The people are outraged, and they have awoken not a sleeping giant, but a sleeping Maccabee. And they're going to see it in the days and weeks ahead.
Minister, you mentioned Iran. Have you seen personally, or are you aware of, any evidence that Iran was directly responsible and helped coordinate these attacks over the weekend?
Well, let me tell you what we do know for sure. We know for sure that Iran provides the last numbers I saw, 93% of the military budget of Hamas is provided for by Iran. They are trying and have worked to put weapons, not just into Gaza, but also in Judea, Samaria, the West Bank. They also support Hezbollah, as you know, on our northern border. We know that as a fact. We know that Iran has coordinated meetings with all of its terrorist proxies in the region, Hamas in Gaza and another terror organization, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza, and Hezbollah, almost a kind of joint operations. I don't want to say joint operations center, but coordinated meetings. There was one question that I'm sure you're interested in. Did they know about this beforehand? Initially, we didn't think that they did. Now there is some evidence that they might have known about it. We are working to verify that evidence. That's why maybe there's some conflicting reports in the press that we don't exactly know. But now that we're looking back and we're looking at all of our intel and seeing exactly what the situation is, it's still not clear to us, but they might have done it. But I have to tell you, they are working right now to bring more and more terror groups into this fight. So everyone has to know it, and it's important not just, I think, to stand unequivocally with Israel against Hamas, to call for freeing the hostages, but also to stand unequivocally against Iran. You know, there's going to be the UN Security Council can tomorrow, Europe, France, Britain, Germany, they can work to snap bang the UN sanctions, the Security Council sanctions against Iran. You have to enforce oil sanctions against Iran. They're exporting a lot of oil. They're getting a lot of money, tens of billions of dollars. It's time that the world unites against Iran, because what you're seeing today is a tentacle of an Iranian octopus. And we have to not only cut off the tentacle, we have to deal with the regime that is sending them. And I hope that the world will stand with Israel, as I said, in the days and weeks ahead, to reverse this and turn it into a victory against terrorism and barbarism.
Minister, we have some news to work through on our side, and I'd love to continue this conversation with you at the same time. According to the CBS White House reporter, at least 9 Americans were killed in Israel. As I'm sure you know, this goes beyond the people of Israel. The whole world is looking at this moment. Just on Iran, you mentioned that you may have some evidence that implicates Iran directly for the operations that took place over the weekend. Could you share with us the nature of that evidence?
Unfortunately, I can't. If I could, I would, but I can't, and we're going to have to look through it. Now, our working assumption is that they may have. Our working assumption a couple of days ago was that they hadn't known about it directly. Now it is unclear, and we'll have to wait to verify it. And, you know, when we make an official statement, we'll make an official statement. But we have to work through that right now, because I want to make sure that when I say it, we know with 100% certainty. Now that is our working assumption.
We did hear this from the Wall Street Journal, that Iranian security officials helped plan Hamas's attacks and gave a green light for the assault at a meeting in Beirut last Monday, according to senior members of Hamas and Hezbollah. Are you aware of a meeting that took place in the last week between Iran and leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah?
They have meetings all the time. It's not secret. You can see pictures of them meeting with Iran leadership, the leadership of their Iranian Revolutionary Guard leadership, their Quds Force leadership, meeting with these other senior officials. So they've had many, many, many meetings over the last few months, and they work very hard. What is Iran trying to do? Those of your viewers who know the map of the Middle East know that Iran supports the Shia militias in Iraq. They're trying to establish a beachhead, a terrorist beachhead against Israel in Syria. They support Hezbollah in Lebanon, which is the northern part of Israel. They support both Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Gaza. Right. They support the Houthis in Yemen. And what they're trying to do is put a noose around Israel's neck with all of these terror groups there. And we have to make sure that we break out of that noose and deliver such a mighty blow that they're not going to forget it for generations.
Ambassador, I want to take your years of experience here, and it's outside your remit, but I'm sure it's something everyone wants to know. I can't get my head around how Israel invades the Gaza Strip. Do you anticipate substantial bombing and air attack, or are we ready for some definitive, original, building-to-building urban warfare in Gaza?
Well, because I'm a member of the Security Cabinet, I'm not going to discuss that. Let's just say we have a clear goal to cripple the capabilities of Hamas and also their will to wage war against us. So you're going to have to interpret that the way you want. I have to leave it at that. But it's people who doubt Israel's capabilities are making a huge mistake. We will do what we have to do in order to achieve that goal. And we are going to have to achieve this goal, obviously, first and foremost for Israel, but it's for all of our Arab partners in the region. Believe me, put aside all of those statements that are made by foreign ministries in the region, and some of you may have conversations with officials from the Middle East, and they may tell you a very different story about Israel than they may be saying publicly. There have been times in the past where Israel has fought with these terror organizations, and the ones who are rooting for us, usually first and foremost, are these Arab states who are threatened by these jihadi forces. Whether it's a Shia jihadi force or a Shia group like Iran and its proxies, or a Sunni group like Hamas, they don't want these forces of barbarism to win because they threaten them.
Ambassador,
and this is very just one thing, if I may. This is also very important for the pursuit of peace eventually, because no one is going to make peace with the weak. We have to be very strong, and it's strength that is actually going to improve our chances to reach an historic peace agreement with Saudi Arabia, which I have no doubt is one of the reasons why this action was taken at this time.
For our audience, Ambassador Dermer, can you triangulate the focus obviously on Gaza, but also now on the West Bank and a fractious northern border with Lebanon? How will Israel affect a three-front war?
Well, we have to ensure that our force structure is done in a certain way that we can deal with any threats that would materialize. And you say quite rightly, we have issues on the northern border. We had sirens there just about an hour ago. We had an attack there yesterday. There are different attempts for attacks. So we have to be clear on our northern border that we have all the capabilities we need to defend ourselves. As you know, the United States brought a carrier group into the Eastern Mediterranean. I think that sends a very strong message to deter our enemies, and it makes it clear that America backs Israel. And again, we're deeply appreciative of the Biden administration for doing that. I think it makes the chances of war less likely, not more likely. And of course, as you said, in the West Bank and Judea and Samaria, we've had terror actions that have happened there, and we have an eye on that. We have to have our eye on a sort of a 360 radius in order to deal with all these different challenges. But I'll tell you, the chances of having a multi-front war grow when people see Israel as being vulnerable. So the stronger and faster we act, the more it will send a message of strength and purpose. And that message is critical to actually ultimately de-escalate the situation and prevent these things from happening for many, many decades. This is an attack, I want to say it again, the likes of which has never happened in the state of Israel. We may have lost 1,000 people in a single day.
Ambassador,
that has never happened in the state of Israel.
Ambassador, there's a big question around Saudi Arabia and the talks about normalizing relations. I know you've been involved with those, and it seems like those are at least iced in the near term. Saudi Arabia put out a statement saying that it repeated its warnings of the dangers of the explosion of the situation as a result of the continued occupation and deprivation of the Palestinian people of their legitimate rights. How much do you see this as really precluding additional discussions with Saudi Arabia and making this kind of normalization talk not viable in the near term?
Well, a lot of people were surprised by the Abraham Accords, a few years ago when no one thought that that could possibly happen. But Israel proved itself, its strength, frankly, its security strength, its economic vitality. I think that's what made those accords ultimately possible. I think the critical question of whether we're going to be able to achieve this historic peace with Saudi Arabia that pushes the whole Arab-Israeli conflict into a completely different place and can lead to a broader reconciliation between Muslims and Jews as well. The critical factor will be how Israel emerges from this fight. Or do we emerge as a victor? Because people make peace with winners. People make peace with the strong. They do not make peace with the weak. And that will be the critical factor. I'm telling you, take all the statements, all the diplomatic statements that have been made, put them aside. It's not relevant. I think there are many Arab partners in this region that want a different future, that are thinking about what's going to happen in 20, 30, 40 years down the road when oil doesn't have the value to their countries that it has today. They need a partner in Israel that can help strengthen their own national security, that can help their own national prosperity. You saw a few weeks ago at the G20 when several countries, the United States, European countries, India, launched this vision of an economic corridor that would go from India through the Arabian Peninsula into Israel and towards Europe. I mean, that's a game changer, an economic game changer for the region. And I think the Saudis have great plans for building their country. And believe me, there are a lot of people in a lot of places in the Middle East, no matter what they say publicly, are rooting for Israel to win. And I think they're going to get exactly what they want.
Minister, just to wrap things up, because I know you have to go, one final question. Winning. How do you define victory in a moment like this one?
Like I said, you have to cripple their capability, and you have to crush their will to do such an action for decades and decades to come. Not just Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, but also other terror organizations in the region. We rely as a small country on our deterrence, but deterrence doesn't last forever. You have to exercise power and force to always make clear to your enemies that you're prepared to fight. Not only do you have the capability, but you have the will to fight. And our enemies, Hamas, obviously miscalculated here, because if they think that this action that they just took in murdering 1,000 Israelis and just shooting our civilians and taking scores of people hostage and having over maybe 3,000 people who are wounded, that this is going to be business as usual, they just have no idea who the people of Israel are. And I think they're going to find out in the days ahead.